Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to another episode of The Elephant in the Room. Thank you so much for joining me. Today, my guest is someone who has many accolades, who is well known in many different categories in St. Lucia. And I wanted to take the opportunity to just hear a story that I've heard a lot about in pieces when I was growing up of a fantastic player, but finally have the opportunity to sit down with him and learn about how it began, how it went, his true experiences while on his journey, and where he is right now. So, without any further ado, I want to introduce and welcome Tremain Shayn, SP Paul, to the podcast. So good evening, SP. How you doing?
Blessed man, blessed and humble. Happy to be here. I just feel like, this has been a long time coming. So, yeah, I'm just happy to share, whatever experiences you need me to. And yeah, it's going to be a good podcast.
All right, thank you so much. So I want to dive right into it and just start off. I want you, if you could remember, just take a moment to remember your first football, your earliest footballing moments. If you think now, what was the first time you remember yourself watching a game, kicking a ball? What was that first footballing moment for you?
Well, to be honest, we started playing on the roads, by the seaside, on the beaches. That's why I started playing my football. So it took me a while to get into the whole going on the field and watching football. I was more or less into playing it rather than watching it at a young age. And then there's someone by the name of Steven Xavier. I'm sure you've heard. I have a tribute match for him every year. So
Yeah.
Steven Xavier, he was kind of the one who took us, along with guys that were older than me. He took us and he took us from the road, from the beaches, and he took us onto the field. And that's where we started training and started doing that type of stuff. And from that, for myself, I started just watching football and I started, being a fan of local football. Before all of that, I just enjoyed playing football.
At what age was that when you first started playing just on the streets before you even got into like organized training and stuff?
Young, young, very, very young, probably like 7, 8. We were just kids. I mean, kids in the seven,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
some kids play marbles, some kids, well, we played marbles, we went to the sea kites, but what we did as well, we played football and we played a lot of football.
What was
So
that
yeah,
trans what was that transition like for you when you moved from, the freedom of the street with there's no outside line per se, there's no referee, there's no cones and anything. What's that transition like from going to that to organized? You have drills that you do now, you have all these kind of things like because some players will say, that freedom of the favela, like they say in Brazil, is taken away from you. What was that like for you? Did you still have the joy that you described like, of playing while you went onto the field now?
funny enough, it didn't even feel like a transition because we never had boundaries. We were never limited to anything. So whereas there were lines on the field, it didn't feel like there were because of what we were doing and how much we were enjoying ourselves. So it wasn't much of a transition. It's more or less when the football started to get a bit more serious. That's when you felt like, you were really transitioning from by the road and, on the beach to actual serious football. And that came about probably I'd say between leaving primary school and entering secondary school when the football was a bit more organized. So yeah, so that was really the transition. But when he took us from the streets to the field, it wasn't sorry much of a transition because like I said, he didn't limit us to anything. He still allowed us to enjoy the football, but he added a bit of discipline to it, you can say.
So obviously, from what it sounds like, one of your greatest early influences was Steven Xavier. But can you think of any other influences during that time which led to either your motivation to keep playing or just like that kind of shaped or molded the player you wanted to be? Whether it was a specific player from that time or a team or a coach, or what were your influences at the time when you would go out there and express yourself?
Well, for me, I used to idolize some of the local players, Medley, Agalo, Guy George. These guys were wonderful players, and I really like seeing them play. So they did influence me, all right. And I like to see we don't have to look abroad, to get that motivation from players to want to actually play the game. We have that motivation right here, and as much as I took it from players like Zidane, players like Ronaldinho, these types of players, Steven Gerrard, I also had these Gerrard's and Zidane's right here. So it was a mixture of the local players and also, I mean, the visual Zidane, Ronaldinho, Gerrard, these great players. So yeah.
How involved or how early did you get involved in national football? Not just like with the national team, but involved in just like inter-district competitions and stuff like that. How early did you get involved in that, and how early did you make that jump from playing amongst your peers to playing with even more senior players or an age group above?
So I started playing with the local senior team. I think I was about 18, 17, 18, thereabout. And I wasn't getting much playing time. No, sorry. I was still in secondary school, actually. So that would have been about, what, 14, 15, 16, thereabout. I was still in secondary school when I was introduced to the senior team. Be that I wasn't playing as many games because at that time, there were a lot of good footballers. All right, so I got introduced to the senior team at that time, but I wasn't getting much playing time. But just an introduction and playing at that level because it's a step up from playing with guys your age to being with senior guys who play, a bit more rugged, a bit more serious with more quality. So I was introduced to that young, but I didn't really make that impact until I was probably like 18, 19. But I was always in the free. I was always there. I was always making sure that I showed up for training. Yeah, so I would say I was introduced to the senior football at like 14, 15, thereabout, but the impact started to come when I was about 18, 19 years old.
Got you. And I want to step away from the football just a little bit. As a young SP in secondary school, even like late primary school, like what other interest did you have? Was there what fueled your drive outside of football? Or football did football consume like your entire like interest at that time?
I'll be honest with you, I was
Because we know you're a bright boy. You went to St. Mary's College. So what other influences did you have at that time?
I was actually capable of playing multiple sports, cricket, basketball, volleyball. But you see the love I had for football, I made a commitment to myself to stick to one sport, and that sport just happened to be football. And to this day, the same love I had when I first kicked the ball, I still have that same love. Be that I don't have maybe the same legs, probably the same fitness, but the same love that I have, that's what led me to just pick football. And I didn't want to play any other sport. Be that they would have tried to make me play because when you're in school, they always try to make you play,
Yeah,
multiple
depending on the season, yeah.
times. But I always rejected playing any other sport. I only wanted to play football. That's all my
So
mind said.
at what age did you think you made that decision, and what would you say to a young kid now who's just a natural athlete in terms of they have the stamina to do track and field, they have the athleticism to play other sports like cricket, volleyball? What would you say to them in terms of choosing a sport? What helped you make that decision?
So more or less my success at the time, and my ability, because I've played for all levels of the senior team from under 15 going up to the senior team. So I've always been a quality player. So that alone was enough to convince me that I could go further with it. It depends. Right now is not before. So you find now you get more players going on scholarships. You find players who are more capable of playing more than one sport has more of a chance of getting a scholarship, all right, to further their career. Because I mean, at some point, you will not be able to play that sport for your entire life. You will need something to fall back on. So what I would say is, if you're good in more than one sport, that's a plus for you because not many people are. So if you have the time, if you have the commitment, go for it. Find the one that you're better at and choose it. But don't limit yourself to one if you are capable of doing more. All right? If you also want to make that commitment to stick with one because you are that confident, go for it as well. But it all depends on what you want to achieve and the future that you want to set for yourself. So neither of them are better than the other one. It's just that that would depend on the individual that you are and the drive that you have and what you want to accomplish in the future.
So you mentioned that you've been with the national team set up from under 15, went all through the youth levels, U17s, U20, 23, all the way up to the senior team. What were these experiences like at a U15 level representing St. against some of the best within the CFU region, CONCACAF region. What kind of realizations did it teach you about yourself? And I ask that just because, from my experience, when I first started playing with the national team and traveling, playing football against other teams, it kind of gave you an opportunity to compare where you are. Because, in your community, you might be a big fish in a small pond, and you're thinking that your abilities are so beyond. And then you get a realization of what it is like within your region. And we all know that the CONCACAF region is doing better, but still not, we haven't produced a World Cup winning team in this region. So, what kind of realizations did you get about yourself at U15 level, U17, even U20, as you went through and represented St. outside of the island?
So aside from the obvious, where the higher you go, the more quality you get in regards to the opponent that you face. All right, but like you rightfully said, when you're home, you're like a big fish in a small pond. But when you go out there, that's when you realize that you have so much to achieve and how far you are from achieving that and getting to that level. And it hits you. And I think, in as much as that's not favorable to us, it's also probably can be used as motivation to drive you to get to that point. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Because some people are content with, okay, I'm the best here, and that's that. But when you're the best here for 3, 4, 5 years, and you go abroad and you're the worst player, that can do a lot to someone who's not mentally strong. That can do a lot to them, and it can impact them so negatively that they may not be able to recover. Because you find a lot of players that are professionals playing for Barcelona, Madrid, Man U. These players go through a lot of depression because of things that happen behind the scenes.
yeah,
And I say that to say, we too, in the Caribbean, as much as we're not professionals and not on that level, things happen to us that kind of get us down to the point where we're not able to get back to that level. So yeah, so the higher I went, the more I realized how much I needed to work. And it was never something where, okay, you move from under 15 to under 17, and from you were in the under 15 setup, you did your work and you're at that level. Then you make that change to the under 17 and you find that you have to keep working and probably even work harder. So every level you go to, you have more work to do. So if you're not someone who's committed and you're not someone who, hey, that's what I want to do, they will leave you behind. And they will leave you behind so quick, you won't even realize that.
yeah. The game of football is can be very unforgiving in that sense that one day you're the new sensation and the next day there's someone new who's turning heads and putting up amazing performances. So as you're going through that point now that you're going from level and you're also learning from your experiences. Okay, I'm doing okay at this level, I've stepped up now, I need to work on this, I need to work on my endurance, my sharpness, awareness, my distribution of the ball, whatever it is. At what point did you start to believe that, hey, I might be better than the people I'm playing with, I might be able to do this professionally? At what point did you say that, okay, let me try to push to do this professionally? And it's not just I like football, I see that this is something I can earn a living off of. And just a follow up to that question, as you answer it, at what point did you start to have like your first kind of experiences with a professional setup, whether it's a tryout or a full signing of a contract? When was that time when you realized you were good enough, and that time when you first had your experiences with them?
So I always believed that I was good enough. Be that I went to a pro setup, be that I was there. That's just how I think. I'm very self motivated. So that's how I always believed that I was capable and able and had that ability to go that step further and also to go all the way. Um, but when I not sort of realized, but when I figured that, I mean, all what I've been thinking to myself and saying to myself, it's actually true. All right. When we went to Canada, all right, and I mean, I scored a goal
I was
for the,
going to bring that up, yes, but yeah.
but but it wasn't just the goal for me. It was seeing the other team play, right? Because the other team had so much of the ball. It was seeing them play and seeing them do nothing spectacular, seeing them do nothing difficult, seeing them do nothing. out of this world. But just seeing them do the simplest of things, right? What I mean by that, one touch pass, knowing when to make a one touch pass, knowing when to hold the ball, knowing when to, just the knowledge that they had is what had them a step above us. Not their ability, not their size, not their speed, not anything to do with physical attributes. It was just they were more knowledgeable than us, right? And that's what I said to myself. But how are they? Some of these guys, you know what you mean by when someone's orthodox, so they awkward,
Yeah, yeah. They don't move like natural footballers.
and you're saying to yourself, if that guy were to be born in Saint Lucia, that guy probably wouldn't even play the sport.
Yeah, just wouldn't
And you're
make it.
looking at talk down on anybody, yeah, but I mean, footballers do that. Footballers will watch a footballer who's well built and would just assume that he's good and probably he's the worst player on the field.
Yeah,
So it
yeah.
happens. But it's not to say that I'm looking down on anybody. But you see that and you're like, but I
Yeah.
of what I know I am good at. You understand? So that was when kind of when I first said to myself, but because I actually on the television, I experienced it firsthand.
Yeah.
So that's when I said to myself, happen Shane, you can. You can. And I just kept going on from like I never lost steam. I just kept going on from there. Like I didn't stop at all.
It's a fantastic experience to get that. And unfortunately, a lot of young footballers in St. Lucia don't get the opportunity to either one see it firsthand as a fan just in a stadium or even like compete against it at that level. We might play teams within our region with like, we play Barbados or whatever, but it's very rare that you get to play one of the top CONCACAF nations like the USA, Mexico, Canada, and see the level that they play. And like you mentioned, it's they even at that level, you don't see many players that get you to the edge of your seat. It's just players who are consistent in what they do. They have good timing in what they do. They don't make as many mistakes. And then you have them with they have the knowledge of when to take a risk. The coach I work with right now speaks a lot about being brave. Like you said that they were keeping the ball, they were not doing anything extraordinary. And he speaks a lot about, hey, we can keep the ball, but we don't create anything by doing that. You have to be brave in possession. And I think that's a part of our football international that we're missing is knowing when to be brave. We get the ball and it's a lot of hopeful Hollywood passes. It's just keeping the ball, shifting a team, and knowing when to be brave with that line breaking pass. But I want to go back to that Canada game because I had it right here. On September 2nd, 2011. Do you remember that date?
What's the question, sir?
On September 11th, 2000, September 2nd, 2011.
Not that date per se. I've had a lot of people come up to me. Even now, people come up to me and tell me about that goal. So the date isn't that important, but I keep getting reminded of that goal
Yep,
every
yeah.
yeah.
How did that goal at the time, or even like a few months, a year or so after it? How did that goal change your life?
Um, it was supposed to change my life because after that game, a scout actually approached me from Toronto FC,
Okay.
and we were supposed to have a few things go on. But I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of it because I want to play the blade game. But yeah, certain things were supposed to happen as per usual with our setup.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the times that I could have had that big break, but I mean, it wasn't meant to be. But I spoke to the scout. We spoke in depth. He took my number. When I got to submission, he called me. We spoke again in depth. And certain things again were supposed to happen and they just never happened, which were of course not my fault because had it been left up to me, it would have definitely happened. But again, you can't dwell on spilt milk.
Yeah, and that's unfortunately a story that we get a lot with our footballers who have when they get the exposure through national team or any other avenue. there are many times where players have impressed and gotten opportunities to go on the tryouts, and then for one reason or the other, it breaks down. How did that affect you mentally? Because looking after you've spoken about, you rose through the ranks. At this time in 2011, you were 20, you just turned 20 years old after celebrating your birthday in August. Like, how did that affect you mentally, feeling that you've put in so much work, finally got to the point where you showcase the world that you can perform and score at this level? How did that affect you after knowing that you didn't almost reap the rewards of all your hard work?
You know what? Not as much as I thought it would. Because I was so used to these type of things not happening for us. So it wasn't as much of a shock. It was more or less something that was evident. Like I knew it was going to happen, so I was already braced for it. So it didn't really affect me as much, and I'm thankful for that because, like I mentioned earlier, certain things happen that can get players into a certain level of depression, and they're not able to bounce back from it. I guess since I was expecting that kind of, you can say, it didn't affect me as much, and that's a good thing because I just kept on, like I said, I never stopped. I just kept on going.
Okay. So after that, what was next for you on your journey in terms of that kind of, faltered away, and it was obviously could have been a huge opportunity. But what was next? How did you redirect yourself after that amazing performance and the prospects that could have happened from that?
Well, I just kept my head down. I mean, you guys tend to guys' heads tend to blow up when they have that type of, I just tried to keep my head down. I mean, I was already known before that goal, so I guess that helped too. So I just tried to keep my head down and just keep working. Whoever I played for, I did my all 150%, and I just kept my head down and I kept working. And that's when I think we had, what year was that? I think we won the blackout after that year or before that year.
Okay. Now, I don't think I would be doing justice to journalism if I didn't try at least to dig a little deeper into the whole saga of this. Do you think it was something on your end, on that scout's end, or someone else's end that resulted in you not getting that opportunity?
It was the FA. I had asked the FA for um for something that they should have had. I mean, because every single FA on the planet has that. And I would have asked them for that to do something to give to the scout, and they were so done with Parrish, like they didn't really. I mean, it's like they didn't care.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
You could see that there was no effort, there was no okay, let's try to get that for you because there's a big chance for you, and you don't get the chances very often,
And this will also benefit the national team on a whole.
and also future players. So their lack of urgency, their lack of interest. I mean, it wasn't something that I was surprised about because again, we would have seen that on multiple occasions.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's basically what happened. And at that time, things were really backwards. Things were really, really, really backwards. And I mean, like I said, I only we I feel like they could have done a bit better. But at the end of the day, that's past, and I wanna really,
Okay.
make that an issue right now.
Fair, fair. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. Just to stay with the national team a little bit longer. So between 2011 and 2019, you made 24 appearances for the national team. How would you describe your career with the Peter Boys?
For the senior national team, I mean, it's always a wonderful experience. The guys getting to travel, getting to experience new cultures, getting to fight together, getting to win together, getting to lose together. So that in itself was a wonderful experience. In regards, career-wise, I mean, I had a few goals, I had a few assists, I had some very poor games, I had some very good games. So, overall, the experience for me was a pretty good one. I mean, given the circumstances. The first part of my career with the national team was played in St. Lucia. The second half, I was in Trinidad, and I think for the last bit, I was in Antigua and then back in St. Lucia. So, for the latter part of it, I think it was more or less something where I just tried to give my all because I knew that I was heading out, you could say, because of what was happening in the whole setup. So for both parts of it, it was enjoyable. It was a wonderful experience. I would advise every single player to get to that level and play for your country. It's eye opening. It's a good experience and it's a lot of exposure for you as well. Mainly for the young players. I mean, for the second part, I was already known. I was already of age, so it wasn't something where I was looking to be exposed. I was more or less looking to help the team in any way that I possibly could, rather than look for exposure. Look for, and I still did get some exposure at the end of the day. But yeah, it was just a wonderful experience overall.
What were your experiences like as a professional, full-time professional in Trinidad and Tobago and Antigua? What was that like? Because we know a lot of St. Lucians have gone across there, and we've heard mixed reviews about it. We've heard players go over there and kind of enshrine their names in some of these clubs as club legends. We've heard of mixed reports of the league at one point being very highly competitive and high quality, at other points the league not being very high quality. We've heard of conditions that players have to endure, both good and bad. So what was your experience like while you were at Trinidad with the connection?
So for the most part, it was a very knowledgeable experience. I will say that. I owe a lot to Trinidad coach at the time, Stuart, to me, the best coach in the Caribbean. I went to Trinidad with a lot of ability, drive. I had just won. When I just got to Trinidad, while in Trinidad, I had won the Solution Football of the Year, actually. Right? So I was already at a certain level. I had won some accolades. I had just won Black Hat. I had, the works. And when I got to Trinidad, what I, what opened my eye was how passionate the coach was about not just winning games or winning trophies, but he was very passionate about players learning. And I'm so thankful for that because that's why I gained most of my, not most, 90% of my knowledge was gained from playing under Stuart Charles, right? So, I mean, there were other things that happened that I don't want to disclose,
Hmm.
but I just want to stick on the positive part of being there. At that time when I was there, the level was very high, very high. There's nothing like the pitcher good or he's not too good or everybody is supposed to be able to do everything. Control, pass, block, shoot, score, head. Everybody is supposed to have knowledge of every single position, every single aspect of the game. So I got go ahead.
What do you think was, if you could put your finger on one, the most important thing that coach taught you during your time there? Because I think that coaches have sometimes been understated. Sometimes people see professionals and they have this ability and they're just like, oh, a coach is not needed because the players have the ability. But we know the motivation that coaches do, the way that they can cause you to see the game in different ways. And coaches have revolutionized football different parts of the world. What do you think was like the number one thing that this coach taught you in terms of seeing the game?
His emphasis on quality, and I think that's so underrated in the Caribbean. Quality is one of the most important aspects of football, and I will down that way. You can have as much talent, as much ability, your physique. If you don't have quality, none of these things will get you to the next level. You can be as fast as you are, as strong as you are. You can have good striking ability, good technique. But if you don't have quality, and I think that's what he sells the emphasis on because
And for our listeners who maybe not as football savvy as us, how would you describe quality in football?
quality is um the way you do things. All right. So I'll give an example. If you're passing about to a player, all right, and the player is coming towards you to receive the ball, you wouldn't pass that ball to that player with a lot of power. You would pass it to him with a certain amount of power where he's able to control comfortably and probably take a touch or probably give you a one touch pass back. You will not just pass the ball anyhow or on any foot because if he's coming to you for the ball, that means that he's trying to get away from pressure. So there's
So if there's a player to his left, right, you won't pass the ball to his left because you will allow the opponent more of a chance of winning the ball from him. You pass it to his right foot, where the player can be between the ball and his opponent, which makes it less likely for the opponent to win the ball. So that's what I mean by quality. Not just doing anything anyhow, doing it with purpose, doing it with the knowledge that you want an outcome from it, not just doing it just for okay, I pass the ball and I lose the ball. No,
Yep. It's
doing
it's
it with
that football intelligence. I remember one of the better coaches that I had over my growing up used to say a completed pass is not always a good pass. A good pass is a pass that your teammate has no issue dealing with. Whether that is you play them through and they can finish it right away, or whether even if it is a 40-yard diagonal that they're it's easy for them to take on their chest. It's not shot at them that now they're struggling. They have to use their head to kind of, or you're playing them between the lines, and there's so much pace on it that it's difficult for them to turn. So again, it's just that we get that quality, and we see that a lot in our football, local football, where the technique of passing the ball is just being shot at someone, played on the wrong side, the wrong foot, playing the ball in the air when you can play it on the ground, those kind of things, leading someone into a pass instead of underhitting the pass. So the quality is I get what you mean by the quality, and I can see why that is so necessary at that next level of the game. What was your experience like in Antigua now? Because it's not as well known of a league within the Caribbean, but we know it's up and coming. What were your thoughts on the league and your time there? What was that like?
So I only had one stint there. The league is about 6 to 7 months, and then there's a cup after that, I think. But I didn't stay for the cup. I just stayed for the league. I mean, lower in sense of quality, both in um, I mean the pitches, the players. So it's not as high as a league. But I mean, at that point, I wanted to get away from Trinidad because I felt like I wasn't progressing. I got a good offer from Antigua, and at the time I was home. So I'm like, you know what? Let me go over there. Let me take them
Explore,
up on that
yeah.
offer, and then let me just see where that goes. And I mean, just the fact that I didn't spend more than one season there should tell you that
Yeah.
I didn't think that I would have grown there. So yeah, so I ended up leaving, and plus I had an injury as well, which just wasn't letting me go, and the level of care wasn't what I expected. So I'm like, you know what? Let me just go home and get the care that I need so I can get better as
Yep.
well.
So according to my records, and again, what I was able to get on Wikipedia is obviously not the entire story of SP, but according to my, you didn't play at a professional level after that. At what point, or what indicated to you, if that was the case, that it was time to effectively hang your boots at that level? At least we all know that you came back and you continued playing, and even now you're still playing at a level. But what indicated to you that hey, it was time to kind of hang my boots at that level?
So there actually wasn't any indicator for that. I actually went to we had played a game in Viewfort. I think that game. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I could hear you now. It cut off for a second, but you're back.
Yeah. So we had played a game in Viewfort against Viewfort North, and I didn't know Latapi was there with Uljan. Russell Latapi was there with Uljan. Russell Latapi has played in Scotland. He's played
Former
in
Porto
Portugal.
man, I believe.
Right.
Yep.
So after the game, I mean, I had a good game. So I scored and I had a good game. So after that game, he approached me and he's like, "Why am I not in Trinidad?" So I'm like, "I'm not in Trinidad for whatever reasons that I gave him." And then he's like, "You're too good to be here." So I'm like, "I agree." So so what are we doing? So he's like, "Well, he can get me a trial in Portugal." So I actually went to a week trial in Portugal. I think it was a third tier club in Portugal, and that was in 2018.
Okay.
That was in 2018, and I spent a week there. The same thing that happened to me in when I played against Canada. Something totally different happened, but it was kind of the same. Was kind of under the same umbrella, you could say. So when I got there, obviously the level of quality increased immensely. Playing against guys from Viewfort North
Even though, yeah.
to playing against guys from Brazil. Korea, Switzerland, Africa. So in Portugal, there are mainly Brazilians and Portuguese. So the club that I went on trial for the first few days, I was expecting them to be doing, because it was preseason, I was expecting them to be doing fitness work. But for the first few days, we did technical work. Everything we did, we had the ball. So we kept on doing that, and we were training, and we did a bit of fitness, but more or less technical work. While doing that, I was involved in an accident. I think it was about 2 or 3 months prior to going to Portugal, and I was down for a while, so I wasn't training. So I'm like, boy, I go in there and I have fit, I have no fitness. What's gonna happen?
Yeah.
But knowing me, I'm very confident, and I'm confident in my ability. So I'm like, you know what, Shane, go there and show them what you can do. So then I went there, and they obviously didn't know where I was from, because small island.
Yeah.
So technique wise, they were not better than me. I'll tell you what it was. Because they were doing these types of things so often,
Yeah.
it became so easy for them. So you would find they would do certain drills, and the drills, they weren't hard for me, right? But it's just that I know, but they made it look so much more easier than I did. And it's because I know that they've been doing that. When you do something repetitively, obviously you get better at. If you don't get better at it, then what you're doing is not for you. I can guarantee you that. Right? And there was one of the guys, he was a Brazilian, and he was of age already. He was about 34. And I was in awe of how he received and moved with the ball. He was never stagnant. At no one point in my week there was he ever stagnant with the ball. What I mean by that is he receives and he moves. He never stays in one position, and he runs with the ball, not at a fast pace, but he runs with the ball, and he's scanning. He's not even watching the ball. He is scanning while running with the ball. I don't think I had ever seen that before in person, right? And when you get stories about when you hear stories like you get players that played with Ronaldinho or Zidane give you stories about them that you probably wouldn't have seen on the TV. That's what it felt. It felt like you have to see that to actually believe how good them men were technically. But I was up to par with them. I was up to par with them, right? It's just that I hadn't been playing at that level
That
for
familiarity of the thing. I share
exactly.
I share that sentiment a bit with you just now because I'm playing at a USL two club here, which is I would say because you have the USL Championship, League One, and then your USL two, and the team is highly competitive. A lot of Division One players, very very good players, and then when you look at just in terms of technique, receiving the ball, passing the ball, I think I'm on par with them. Where the difference you start to see the difference is just the familiarity with the drills. They go into it. It's a team that's been established, much like yourself. You're going in there for a week. These guys have been there for a while. You go in there and you see that when there's a drill, the coach might not explain it because they've done it a few times. We do a few drills where it's like a 4v4 plus three, but in a different kind of setup, and you just go, and then the first 3-4 minutes of the drill, I am still trying to figure out what the objective is, who I can pass, what zones I can go in, and that kind of takes away from your focus on just like enjoying the drill, putting in effort, and you get confused and you almost start to forget a little bit about your technique. So I feel that in that experience, and that's why I think it's so important for young players to have those experiences going overseas, but also introducing them to that level of coaching, that level of competition on the island itself. So how did that, like, what was the end result of this tryout, and what other experiences or what else did you see that like really impressed you during that your time there?
So the experience was a good one. I mean, at the end of the day, I've not been in that type of setup with these types of players of that level of quality. I mean, I've played with quality players, but not so many at once, because everybody was good. Everybody had good touch. Everybody had good awareness, good knowledge of the game. So yeah, so it was just good to be there and to gain that little bit of experience. I mean, I wasn't contracted, but the experience was good for me, and it's something that I can share. I can give back. I can use that knowledge that I got there and give back because there was a lot of knowledge shared there. All right. And I actually still follow a few of the guys. Some of them have moved to, there's one that's moved to Dubai, there's one that's moved to, I think he's in Spain right now. So I follow a few of the guys. But I think what what holds us back is the fact that again, we're a small country, so we're not. No one will take a chance on a country that's someone from a country that's not well known.
Yeah.
Essentially, as much as I don't think that should matter, it does. It does.
And I think that becomes the reality as you get a little older in chasing the dream. You realize that the talent in itself is not alone. I remember just, when I was, in my late teens and just like starting to get into pursuing and pushing for professional football. I remember some of the conversation I had with agents about just like the amount of the quota on international players that you can have on a team. Because obviously when a country designs a domestic league, it's to benefit the domestic players. Yes, they want the best of the best to come out, but a majority of the team, whether it's they have a quota of 70% of the roster should be from that country, and then now you're looking at 30% from the rest of the world, and they only going to want the best of the best. And the best of the best means players who have a certain amount of international caps, players who have played in certain international competitions, whether it be a Gold Cup, a Copa America, a World Cup, even. And then you look and just like coaches looking at you and where you're from, meaning like, does your country have a league? Are you used to playing a 9 month season? Will your body be able to compete, or are you used to just playing knockout tournaments where you only play for a month or two? So all these things that are taken into consideration. And like, I just recently heard the national team coach Stone John, commented on that when the team was in Curacao, speaking about Curacao has players playing, all year round, and we have a very short league, and how that benefits or doesn't benefit rather our players. So coming back from that, you had that experience, fantastic experience. You learned a lot. What was the at that point? Because at that point you were 27 years old, I believe. Were you still trying to pursue that dream of still getting another contract at that top level? Because you had come from Antigua playing against Viewford North, and Latapi kind of took a chance on you and sent you there. Like, was it like I've kind of gotten everything I wanted out of football at that level, and I'm gonna play just for enjoyment, or what? Where was your mind at that point after you had that learning experience?
So I still wanted to be in a setup where it was professional and I could have gotten back to my best. I had a few offers from Antigua. I had a few offers from Trinidad, but I just wasn't interested in going back there because I felt like I had already been there and it didn't benefit me per se. So I just felt like not going back there and going like getting that experience elsewhere. All right. I did get an offer from Jamaica actually. At that time, but I chose not to because I didn't know much about the Jamaican league at that time, so I just chose not to. But in hindsight, I think if I had learned more, like if I had taken the time to learn more, I think that I probably would have taken that chance. But
Yeah.
that's neither here nor there.
Okay. So I want to almost shift away from my last question, just on, I guess, on your career. You grew up, and you from a very tender age you have always been kind of singled out as a promising player, a player that would be going places. You had brilliant experiences, you had fantastic travels and opportunities to play in good setups. And this might be a touchy question, but would you consider your time pursuing this a success as like a former golden boy, or a prodigy? And do you have any regrets from your time, or football wise, your football career? Do you have any regrets, or would you consider it a success?
So the way that I think I would most definitely not call it a failure, but I don't think that I was as successful as I could have been. I think I had the ability to go a lot further than I got. But again, there were a lot of challenges that would have prevented that, albeit that that's not an excuse that I think that I should use, but it's a reality at the end of the day. All right. It not a failure, but also not as successful that I would have loved to be. But looking back, I can be content in saying that I've been there, I've gained the experience, and I've done enough to at least if I need to push the future generation, I will be able to do that. So that gives me a certain level of achievement, knowing that I have that in my locker and I can use that to help someone else.
Yeah, I think that that would have been my next question: is how does this experience, or just even that way that you lamented that, well, you're happy with what you did, but you know you could have done a lot better. How does that show up in your person today? Because I remember growing up, there were a lot of people in and around my community in Derry, so even like Mikud South, Mikud even, who had promising starts to their careers. We have people who made national teams early and had opportunities where they, at least from their accounts, they spoke to scouts and they had opportunities to go play elsewhere, and they didn't realize that dream. And from what I've seen, sometimes that almost like ability early on, but that not realization of that potential can lead some people to become very bitter to young players, because they're just like, obviously now there are more opportunities now than they were before, and in 10 years time there'll be more opportunities then. So sometimes they become very bitter to young players, doing it, and like, oh, if I had the opportunities I would do better, or I'm better than you at your age. How does that show up for you now? Like, how do you convey those experiences now in your football, in your life?
So actually, right now I'm playing for I play for the Miku team, and we have a lot of young players. We have a lot of players that are inexperienced, and you find that I take my time to help them. I take my time to share my experience. I take my time to give them that knowledge that I have, because I want them to be better than I was. I want them to go further than I went. Be that, I mean, maybe they're not as good as I was when I was their age. Sometimes it's not always the ability, but more is the knowledge that you have. And I have never tried to compare myself to anyone younger than me. I have never been that person to be like, oh, he's not good as I was for my age, or I've always been one to support the youth, because I feel like they are the ones who have to take us from that. They are the ones who bridge the gap, basically. And if we don't share our knowledge, if we don't give, because when I was growing up, I didn't have that type of player to look up to. If I did a mistake, if I if I needed some guidance, they would be able to come and share their experiences with me. I didn't have that player. So that's why I am so adamant on being that player for these younger players who are now coming up. If they don't want it, I'm still willing to force it, because sometimes you have to force it into them.
For sure.
So I never tend to be on the negative side. I'm always trying to be positive. I'm always trying to help. I'm always trying to push them further, because again, I am on my way out. Next year, I intend to do my coaching licenses. So I'm on my way out. Not because I'm on my way out doesn't mean that I cannot share what I have. I am so eager to share what I have. That's why I am part of the um, Boys Love Foundation as a coach, and I'm part of the Miku senior team, because I want to give them that, and I don't want to just give it to them and say it to them. I want to be able to do it with them. So to give them that hands on, rather than just say it to them, because some people are visual learners. Not everyone learns through theory. Some people do, and that's good. But some people learn visually. You have to show it to them for them to do it. You understand? So I just want to be there for them. I want to help them as much as I possibly can, be it from a coaching standpoint, from a player standpoint, whatever whatever capacity that I can help in, I am always happy to do that.
And from your work with these young players, and we know notoriously Miku has produced a lot of top level young players who have gone on to represent the national teams at various levels. From your perspective, what do you think it takes right now, not just in Miku, but just in St. Lucia in general, to produce more professional players at the top level? Because some people might say it's the resources, but we see that there are countries who are less privileged than us, or some countries within South America, or even parts of South America, who are much more impoverished than us, even on the African continent, even places in, like, Eastern Europe, in Asia, who don't have the facilities that we have even then, and they still produce top players. What do you think, from just your experience of watching it and also still playing with them right now, that you think we need to establish? Because we launched our semi-professional league last year, and I'll ask your opinions on that. But what do you think we need to do to produce more professional, high quality players?
That's a very good question. It always has to start from the grassroots, all right? Because like I mentioned, when I went to Portugal, these players have been playing at a certain level for a while. These players didn't just turn 23, 24 and just start to play at that level. No, these players have been playing from that level from a very young age. So I think we need to invest in proper academies, not just summer academies or winter academies, year-round academies. So the players play at a certain level year-round, and they're used to it because, like we all know, like all footballers know, when you get to a certain age, the habits that you had before that age, you will not lose it as easily.
Yeah.
So we need to get them into the habit of having quality, having discipline, knowing when to, knowing when not to, right? On top of having the ability, because we cannot teach ability. We we cannot teach talent, but we can give them the knowledge that they need to go that step further. And I feel if they get that knowledge from a very young age or a young enough age, I think that would help set them up for a better. You would get more players going further. And I think also the school football, right, needs to be more serious, needs to be more organized, needs to be it there needs to be more of an investment in that because that's a step. All 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 footballers have to go to school. Literally all of them have to go to school, be it primary, be it secondary, be it tertiary, they have to go to school. So if you can at least have them come from the grassroots and then go into the secondary program at a certain level, just like Jamaica's doing, there would be a lot less work to be done when they get to the sea because that's the difference between the Caribbean and Europe. When these players get to a certain level, the coach doesn't have to teach them certain things. The coach only has to focus on what he wants done. Do you think a coach that is coaching Madrid will come and teach a player when to take a one touch, when to take two touch? No,
At that point, you're playing every 3 days. There's no time. It's just we're
these
working on
players,
tactics and set pieces for the next game.
these players learn these little things not by just only training, but just by doing it over. It becomes so a part of you, you don't even realize that you're doing it because that's just what you feel like your body. That's muscle memory. It's telling you that that's what you do every day. So keep on doing it. You understand? I think it's backwards to have to teach a player when to take a one touch pass at a senior level. A 22 or 23-year-old have to come and teach you to give a better angle to receive a ball. I have to tell you when to play forward. No. I have to trust that you already have that knowledge prior to being here. Right now, I want to teach you how I want my football played on top of your knowledge that you already gained. So that's the difference, and that's why I think for the national team, you're not getting players who have that quality if they don't go out.
Because we're not introducing it at a grassroots level. And I
We-
agree with that. I
We're not.
think I think we're neglecting so many opportunities that we have to teach players better. I also think a big problem with football at that level is the instruction that we're giving to kids. I remember growing up, and some of the forbidden rules, is you don't play the ball across the back. Just rules like that teach you don't throw the ball backwards, like stuff like that. Growing up hearing it makes players very scared to have the ball. It doesn't teach the emphasis or the importance of situation. Of there are times when you play the ball across the back. You see teams do. You see Barcelona, the Man City, they keep the ball between the center backs, they draw somebody in, and then they beat the press. It's all about the timing, but making players brave on the ball, making players comfortable having the ball at their feet. You see defenders afraid to give midfielders the ball if they drop in. They prefer to hit it 40 yards because they have that fear. And I think like older players, or even when I was growing up at least, taught that fear of, okay, we don't want to play with the ball here. We need to get comfortable. I think we need to have our kids playing a lot more small sided games when they're younger, 7v7, 9v9, 5v5, to get comfortable with the ball in any position of the pitch, whether you're a striker, a midfielder, a defender. Getting comfortable and having that understanding of situation of, hey, like, you don't do this sometimes. It's not just, there's nothing in football you don't do ever. I think it's always about the situation. There are sometimes you do a back heel, and sometimes the coach will tell you, why don't you just play it with the side of your foot. So that's one of the things I think is holding our football back, is the education you get either from coaches, or on like a local level, maybe not the national team level, and also like older players, the knowledge of the game and how they share that with other players. So you mentioned you now with Miko and you're getting ready for our semi-pro season. Based on last year, what were your impressions of our first year having a semi-professional league?
So I didn't go to watch many of the games, but I feel like that should have happened about 10 years ago, to be honest. That's so late. But the fact that they've introduced it, I think it's a step in the direction, albeit it's happened 10 years too late. It's a step in the right direction. And I think from that, they actually need to build on that. What I mean by build is, I mean, build around it. So build everything that will contribute to it, to the players that's coming into it, to the young players that are watching it.
Give me
Give
some examples.
so all right. So for the grassroots that are growing up, right? These young kids know what good football is and what match is. All right,
Yeah.
they know. So we need to instill again the quality, like I said. And you know what I've noticed? A lot of the coaches that have the licenses and coach in St. Lucia. I mean, I don't want to come down on anybody here, but that's just an observation.
Hmm.
Like they don't pay attention to again quality. I'll give you an example. See, there were times where we trained and we couldn't train for more than a minute because he blows and he doesn't want that. It's not enough
Standards,
quality.
having standards.
He
Yeah.
doesn't want that. It's not good. So do it better. And until we don't do it better, he keeps on stopping the game.
Yep.
So now, so now, be that you want to or not, you are forced to do better. Be that you mad, be that you want to sweat. Because what he doesn't want it to turn into a sweat. He wants it to keep stay at it's training and we're training and we have an objective.
Right.
So he wants to solve it. He wants to stick to his objective because he knows if we stick to it, that's when we get the quality. And everything else follows from that. You understand? So I think a lot of it because even seeing the local team stream, you hardly see a coach come and the coach will start the training session and say, okay, fellas, we are doing that today, and we'll do some passing drills, and then we'll do some finishing, and then before the drill actually starts, okay, fellas, our objective today with the passing is not to be is not speed, but quality and knowing when and knowing how to pass the ball. So left foot, right foot, you know how much pace. So you don't get coaches going into depth and telling the player why he is doing what he is doing. What they are doing rather is just telling them to do the drill. But if you tell that player the reason for the drill is for this and that, the player will know, okay, I'm doing this to achieve that. Not just doing that just for doing it sake. That's what has the players most of the time because they haven't been in a pro setup. That's what has them certain times just doing it just for doing it sake because the coach said do it.
100%. I think you hit the nail on the head there, and that's something that, through my experiences here, working with very high level teams that are in and around professional football in terms of the USL, the MLS, is learning how poorly we train in Saint Lucia. I am so thankful for the coaches that I've worked on a local level in Saint Lucia in my community because they lit that fire of loving and being obsessed with football for me. If I have to be critical, and I always want to be very honest with people, I did not learn much about the game beyond the just sheer passion that I have for the game from these coaches. Because I think in St. Lucia, we just do a lot of drills, like you said, just because we want to do the drill. There is not an organization of training to say that they're working on this. I think the most important thing in football is awareness, is knowing what's around you, is seeing it. Because even if you have that bad technique, if you're aware, you might put yourself in a certain pocket where you have more time to settle the ball than somebody else. But awareness of what's going on around you is so essential. And we don't do many drills that call for awareness. I remember doing drills like passing in a square, or doing drills like attackers versus defenders, or just doing shooting drills that are not something that's easily replicable in a game, just because that's something a coach saw on YouTube or a coach saw a diagram of, and just missing that opportunity to teach kids at a young age to check your shoulder, be aware, know how to lose a marker because you see the marker, now you're aware. So many opportunities are being missed in our coaching because we lament a lot about players are not professional, players are coming in late and players are drinking and players are, but the coaching setup that we have is also very poor. Just being honest with what I've seen, at least, coaches are very passionate about the game, don't get me wrong, but the way that they teach young players to interpret the game is so far from where we need to get.
Definitely, I agree with that. I definitely agree with that.
And just as we go into some closing, I want to just maybe ask two more questions. Firstly, is now that you're working with those young players, to any young player listening to this podcast right now, what advice would you have for them as they go along their journey of trying to become a professional?
Stay humble. Stay humble. Stay grounded. Stay hungry. You have to have that hunger for the game. You have to be committed, and you have to know what you want. You have to be very willing to learn. I find we don't have a lot of players willing to learn. So I would say to them, be very open to learning. Very, very open. Also do your own learning. All right. Watch the game differently. Because when I watch football, as much as I watch it for the thrills, the skills, the goals, I watch it from a different perspective. Formations, positioning, these types of things, tactics. So you have to be hungry, you have to be humble, you have to have the right attitude and be very disciplined if you want to get anywhere because we already have the challenge of poor networking. Getting out of St. Lucia to play anywhere, there's a poor network for that. I mean, I see that they're trying to change that, but still, there's a poor network. All right? Be that as it may, everybody has the same 24 hours in a day. We have good facilities, we have good coaches, we have good players that can be mentors. Pick a player, pick a local player, have him mentor you. Because I'm sure that there are players, Zane, Pernal, Terran, Jamil. They are good players that want to mentor. That if I see a youth player come to me in the machine, I'm a bit shy, but I would like for you to help me. I would jump at that chance because the player is willing. So your willingness to do things will take you very far. Not just being there and just doing what you're told. I mean, yes, you want to listen to the coach, but you want to go the extra mile for yourself because at the end of the day, the coach has already been there. The person you're looking to mentor you has already been there. So the onus is on you to want to get there, and you have to be hungry for it. You have to be willing to work, and what I mean by work is work twice as hard because we're already starting on the back foot. So work twice as hard, keep your head down, and do not ever let somebody let you doubt yourself. Always have that confidence, and there's a thin line between confidence and arrogance and being cocky. So you want to be on that line where you are confident and you know what you can do, and that's because you're at it every day. I mean, not Sunday to Sunday, but as much as you can, you're working because you know you're working towards something. If you don't know what you're working towards and you're just working, it's pointless. So know what you want, visualize what you want, and just work towards it. And I can guarantee you the opportunities are endless because, like I said, as much as the networking isn't the best, there are things in place to get players out of it.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I think it's important to use your network and also your resources, and just control what you can control. Control the controllables, as they say. Is like you can't help the passport that you're given when you're born. You can't help where you at, but there are still things that you could do. We still have facilities. We still have a pitch. We still have a ball. For essentially, that's kind of all you need, and also making use of those resources. The games now are finally being recorded and posted on YouTube, and just like challenging yourself to really be analytical and looking at football, like you said, very differently. Not, yes, you still want to watch it for the entertainment value as a fan and enjoy the thrills of, a back and forth game, but also maybe after you go back and look at the game and look at how they progress the ball forward. Look at the shape they get into when they're in position, out of position. Look at the way that players players interchange with each other. Look at the choice of passes. He made a pass, but why did he play that pass square instead of forward? Look at the furthest player away from the ball. What is he doing when this player is progressing the ball? Is he coming short? Is he spinning in behind? Are they switching out positions? What kind of communication is being done? There is still so much that you could do. And I think just to put yourself in that position, because the opportunities will present itself, and the worst thing that can happen is that the opportunity presents itself and you're not ready. So super important. And the very last thing I will ask you is, just on a global view now, what do you think makes a player the best in the world, and do we set unrealistic expectations on players, like on a worldwide scale at the very highest level?
The question was, what do I think
What
is
do you think?
expected?
What do you think makes the player the best in the world, and do we set
Mhm.
unrealistic expectations? Because you see players getting criticized after a poor game here or poor game there, but if we have to be honest, they are human beings and they play in excess of 50, 60 games a season. So what makes a player the best in the world, and do we set unrealistic expectations for players?
So I'll answer the second one first. I don't think we set unrealistic ones. I think we've been spoiled by Ronaldo and Messi,
For
where
sure, yeah.
they've given us so much to look forward to that now when we don't get it, it seems unrealistic. But we have to remember at one point for 10 to 15 years, two players made it realistic. So I don't think it's unrealistic. I think it's very much possible. It's just that we were spoiled and we didn't even realize it. So now we're just keeping it to that standard, because look at Haaland. Haaland, had a amazing season scoring all in. So it's not that it can't happen. It's more than possible. I mean, it's just that these players have to have that kind of mentality and drive that CR7
And
and
Messi
Messi
did,
have.
yeah.
But what I think makes a player the best is it comes down to a whole lot of factors. But I think on the overall, I think the first thing would be consistency in both individually and also collectively. I think also the achievements as well, right? Be that I think start padding has kind of spoiled the game a bit,
Yeah.
but I mean you have to understand that the achievements matter as well. I think based on the position that you play, what is expected of you, how good you are at it. So, for example, if you're a defender, how good are you at defending? This thing about rating defenders based on how many goals they have a season and how many
Ridiculous.
long passes, I find that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I feel like if you're rating a defender, let's rate a defender on defending and not on having scored the winner or goal, no. Or he's very good on the ball. Rate him on defending. And then if you find that there are two players that are just as good as defending, now you go to, okay, probably down is a bit better on the ball. So that's when you go into this conversation. But these conversations I had before even thinking about the defending aspect of the
100%.
game.
Yeah.
You understand? So yeah, so I think overall it's the consistency, it's the achievements, it's also the level that you're playing at, right? Because I mean you wouldn't compare a championship player to a player that plays in the Prem and plays Champions League and then has to go and play Euros, World Cup qualifiers. So it's the level that you play at as well. And yeah, I think based on the type of player as well. Right now, I think um the best midfielder in the world is Vitinha, based on the season that he's had and the season that he's continuing to have.
Yeah.
That's my humble opinion. I think he's the best midfielder in the world
Do you
because
do you
go
think
ahead.
do you think it's more important to be consistent on a certain level, like just having consistent performance? Because for example, I think it was 2021, Jorginho was stood in the the Ballon d'Or rankings. However, there are players that we know in terms of talent. Now, talent is a word thrown out here. For me, talent is the ability to have something special. Being athletic is a talent. Being able to handle the ball is a talent. But for me, the currency of football and why these players are always seen as the best is people who are able to score goals consistently and create goals consistently. So is it enough as a midfielder almost to, yes, you're controlling the game, dictating the game, but ultimately there are players who have the ability, maybe not every game, but the ability to pick up a ball, go past someone and either create or finish, or simply be in the box and finish. Like, do you think it's more important as a Vitinha, or even last year as a Rodri, to dictate the game, or being someone that decides games through scoring?
I'll give you two words. Luka Modric. I was happy that Modric won the Ballon d'Or for two reasons. It meant that football for at least 1 year didn't start bad. They just went based off of footballing, pure footballing performances, right? And you find that as much as Modric wasn't impactful with assists and goals, his impact overall was so great that they couldn't not they had to recognize it, right? And I think it's a bit different for midfielders and defenders and forwards, because you find forwards will always be more impactful because you know what they say, goals win games, right? So you find forwards are always by nature more impactful. But for me, and it may sound biased because I am also a midfielder, I feel like the controlling of the game, the dictating of the game, that in itself, that is, I would take that over impact, because with that comes impact. With impact doesn't come with scoring, and have an impact doesn't come with controlling the game. So I rather have one and have the other come with it than have one and not have the other. If you get what I'm
Yeah,
saying,
understood.
all right? Because I think that's what happened to Madrid this season. As much as Mbappe won most goals and they were scoring,
No control
they
over
had no
games.
control. It was, yeah, they had no control over games, and you found that Inter, who were not scoring as much goals as Real, they had more control over the game. Because why? The the midfield was working.
Yep.
The team collectively was working. So I feel like, I would rather take the control and the players being able to dictate the game over impact, because I feel like impact comes with that as well. Because you can't be controlling the game and not have an impact on it. You have to get into the, if you 90% of the time, if you're controlling the game, you will win the game.
Yep. Yep.
No, no one of chances, you lose the game, but that's fine. But overall, over a season, if you're dominating games for the entire season, you are more than likely to win
Some
the league.
some trophy, yeah.
Right,
Yep.
right.
Got you, got you. Okay. Well, SP, I want to thank you so much for your time here. I know we ran a little bit over, but thank you so much for your time. I also want to wish you good luck on the season. I'll be keeping a keen eye. Last year, I tried to watch all of the matches on YouTube. I got to see a fair bit of them. This year, looking forward to doing the same. So I want to wish you all the best on your season. Again, thank you for your impact on the young players. And you've mentioned you mentoring them and everything. So just really, really happy that we're able to do this. I want to wish you the best, and just want to give you the opportunity to just kind of close here, and just if you have any final words as we close.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks a lot for that. I've been listening to your podcast. I mean, for the past few times, and I think that is a very great initiative. I wanted to just, congratulate you and just ask you, to just keep going, because these experiences and hearing from certain people, hearing from certain players, that too in itself can motivate a lot of people, be it not even footballers. But I think that's a good initiative, and I just want to, commend you and ask you to, to keep on going. And to anyone listening, I'm always here to share my knowledge. I'm always here to give insight. I'm always here to be a part of anything that is get towards the youth, or just get towards football and having a positive impact, be it whatever it is, be it how far it is. I'm always willing. I am always there. I'm always available, unless I'm not through my work, but I'm always here, always willing. And I just want to encourage everybody who probably thinks that, it's not their time, or they're not doing enough, or just keep on going. Just put your head down, stay humble, keep going. Do not let anything affect you. If you really want it, I can guarantee you nothing will stop you.
Yep.
If you really, really want that, there's nothing that can stop you from getting that. because what God has for you will always be for you. I can guarantee you that.
Wise words from someone who has been there, seen it all, done it all. Someone who has won everything available in St. Lucia and gone beyond and shared his talent with the world, the Caribbean and the world over. Shane, Tremain, Shane, Paul, everyone, thank you for listening and have a good evening.
All right, man. Take it easy.